Hey TCC students, it's Emily. We are so excited that you're here with us on YouTube this morning. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's the best way for you to stay up to date with all the things that we'll be posting over the next few weeks. We want to let you know that summer camps are still on as of now. So if you are a current 6th grader or 7th grader, you can come to Elevate Summer Camp. If you are a current 8th grader, 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader, then you are invited to come to Move Camp. We're going to drop a link to our website in the comments so that you can go ahead and register. Let us know if you have any questions about that. And before we move into worship today, we have a question for you this week. Your question is, if you could go on an Easter egg hunt with any celebrity, who would you choose? You got 15 seconds, drop your answers in the comment, and then we're gonna go into a time of worship.
Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, 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 Jesus, our redemption, our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, 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 oh,
Sing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean and pure hearts would receive God. His name is Jesus.
Sing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace to God. His name is Jesus. Oh, swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace to God.
His name is Jesus.
Jesus, our redemption, our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come.
Hey TCC students, happy Easter. I know that it's not Easter Sunday yet, but we are kicking off our Easter series today that we are calling Happy Easter. And the truth of the matter is we are not living in the happiest of times right now, right? So we think it's more important than ever to focus on the happiness that comes with Easter. Before we do that, I do want to address one of my least favorite parts of Easter, which is the Easter Bunny. I also have to confess that I have also been one of those parents who has taken my child to see the Easter Bunny in tears. And I don't get why us parents continue to partake in this tradition, because 9 times out of 10, the pictures turn out awful, right? Like the kid is legitimately terrified, and it is so sad. And I sincerely hope that as junior high and high school students, that your parents are not planning on dressing you up and taking you to go see an oversized bunny this Easter. But I think we can all think back and remember that feeling of being afraid, of being so scared. And there is nothing that can take away our happiness faster than fear. And that's what we get to talk about today, because fear is something that has controlled our world and it's dictating so many of our lives today. And see, fear has been around since we were really little kids. It started out when we were afraid of things like monsters in our closet and afraid of the dark. And then as we got older, our fears morphed and we started to become afraid of bad grades, being rejected by friends, being afraid that the crush that you like isn't going to like you back. And the older that we get, I think the more apparent it is that our fears are not going to go away. Our fears actually just grow with us and they follow us. And we live in this world today where everywhere we look, the social media, our news feeds, they are filled with fear and people making decisions that are filled with fear. And out of all these different fears, if we boil it down, I think it all comes down to one thing: the fear of death. And you might be thinking, whoa, Emily, you took that a little dark. I'm afraid of getting sick, but I'm not afraid of dying. I know, but here's the thing. Fear of death doesn't just mean a physical death. Fear of death means just the fear of things that we think that we'll never be able to get back. We fear that this school year might be over, right? We have fears that relationships might end or fears of dreams that might die. Our fears of death means that we are afraid that we are going to lose something that's not ever going to come back to us. And those fears can make it hard to remain joyful, to remain peaceful in these seasons. And that is exactly where Easter enters. Easter enters right in the middle of our fear of death. And Easter changes everything because in Easter, we get to celebrate Jesus. Jesus is the one who came to earth. He died on the cross as a criminal. But then 3 days later, when no one expected it, he rose from the grave. And when he did that, guys, it changed everything. It especially changed everything in the life of a guy named Paul. Now, Paul is one of the most famous Christians in the history of the world. But before Paul met Jesus, do you know what Paul was famous for? Killing Christians. He spent his life trying to convince Christians to deny their faith, and he threatened them with death. And then Paul met Jesus, the used to be dead, but then is no longer dead, resurrected Jesus. And that changed everything for Paul. From that moment on, Paul became one of the most famous missionaries throughout all of the world. And Paul was persecuted. He was beaten. He was imprisoned. He was even bitten by a venomous snake, y'all. My worst nightmare. But Paul continued to press on because he was so passionate about telling people about the power of the resurrection of Jesus. And he believed in that so much that he continued in spite of his fear and persecution, so much to the point that Paul was eventually killed for his faith. And throughout all of his letters in the New Testament, when we read, we do not see a spirit of fear in Paul, even though he was facing really real and scary trials. And as we see his letters, you'll find out why. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says, "Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" That's 1 Corinthians 15, 54 to 55. And I love this verse because I kind of think of Paul as taunting death, right? He's saying, come at me. What else do you have? You can't get me. You can't touch me. He's saying that because of what it is that Jesus did, there is nothing that death can do that is more powerful than Jesus. And if you don't hear me say anything else today, I want you to hear this. Easter means that fear is not final. See, because if Jesus can defeat death, he has the power to defeat our fears today. There is nothing that we are going to face today, even the coronavirus. There is nothing that is more powerful than Jesus. Now, I know some of you are listening to me hear that, and you're also saying, but wait, you can't really tell me not to be afraid. In the light of the world that we're living in right now, just have faith and don't be afraid. I still have anxiety. I'm still depressed. I'm still scared about what's going to come in the next few days, in the next few weeks. And look, I understand. Just because we know that fear is not final doesn't mean that fear isn't real. And it also, your faith is no guarantee that the things you're afraid of might not come true. But what your faith does mean is that you are more equipped to handle it than you might realize that you are. There's another thing that Paul says that brings me so much comfort in this time that we read in Romans 8:11. And it says, "The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you." He's saying that the same power that lived in Jesus 2,000 years ago when he defeated the ultimate fear of death, that same power lives in you today as you are sitting home alone with all of your fears of isolation and finances and schools and boredom and friendships. The same power that defeated the grave lives in you today. Our job today isn't to laugh at fear or to ignore it, but our job is to not let it hold us back, because fear does not get the final word. It can't. It's not as powerful as Jesus. Nothing in this world can even match the authority and the power of Jesus' name. So all we need to do is take one small step towards facing our fears. And I don't know what that small step is for you today, whatever it is that you're feeling most afraid of or most held back in your fear by. My hope and my prayer is that you would be able to take a small step forward as you realize that fear does not get the final word. If you believe in who Jesus is and what he did through Easter, through his death and his resurrection, then you're not facing this fear alone. You get to face this fear with Jesus, who has defeated the ultimate fear. And that is what we base our faith in today. As we see other people overwhelmed by fear and directed by stress, you and I, we don't have to live that way. We are free, and we can choose to accept the realities that are all around us and to look towards Jesus, who has defeated death because he is our eternity, right? He is final. Fear is not. So in the face of all of our fears that we're facing today, Twin Cities students, my hope and my prayer for you is that you would choose to look towards Jesus, towards the power that he has given you, that Romans 8:11 says, "The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you." And guys, the world today needs you to live in the Spirit of Jesus. We're praying for you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.